Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Glad you're here.
Josh's Squared to welcome you to episode 10 of season 4, Radiant Reflections.
Yep.
What's up? We hope you're doing well.
Yeah. Same clothes, no coffee. Kind of.
That's true. But you know what? I realized we had people do that. The entry, so apparently not very many people actually listen to the coffee portion of our podcast. But so I've got a few names.
Okay, really I forgot about this, Josh.
So I'm gonna click the raffle button on my phone here.
Okay.
And we're gonna see, and we'll see who wins a bag of coffee of their choice.
I'd forgotten about this initiative.
That's right. Yeah, apparently not a ton of people.
Like our coffee banter.
Or it's possible that more people listen. And Dustin Miller,
a great cup of coffee. He's a coffee guy. He likes good coffee.
So, Dustin, you've got to let me know what roaster you would like a bag of coffee from. And I will get that ordered up for you.
Delicious.
So,
cool.
Dustin's good dude, rocking it on the worship team.
Yeah.
Guitarista.
He wasn't on yesterday.
No, but I mean,
yesterday, but yes. Yeah, he's great player.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there you go. Dustin, you will have a bag of coffee headed your direction.
Yeah.
As soon as you let me know
which one you want. Yeah.
So
Huck, you've got Upper Left, you've got Kova, you've got Heart, you've got Proud Marys, you've got Onyx. I mean,
we've referenced a lot of different roasters.
3 Ships, which we just drank last episode 9. I mean, there's a lot of good coffee out there.
Now, if you ask for a big can of Folgers, Dustin, live on this podcast, we'll pour it into the dirt.
We will. Yeah, we'll go out into the yard and we will, and then probably grind it in a little bit with our boots.
I would waste $4 of my dollars on a giant can of Folgers just to do that.
No, I think Dustin is a normal person though. Like he would drink Folgers if someone offered it to him because he's just a polite guy. I'm not gonna. And I'll drink it too, right? Choke it down is probably the better way to say it. But his preference would be good coffee. He always likes when we make good coffee back in the green room.
Right on.
Yeah.
So
cool. All right, well, let's jump in. We made just a few pages on episode 9. Episode 10, we're starting on page 72 with the big heading, Formation Defined. Remember, we're in part 2 of the entire Practicing the Way book, which is to become like Jesus. And again, we will say to you, our goal for all listeners and viewers of season 4 of Radiant Reflections is that you would at least begin the process of creating a rule of life. And again, this is just a thing that defines the choices that you're making to be the person that first and foremost Jesus wants you to be, and deeply inside who you want to be. You want to be like him. You want to bring God glory. You want to grow the kingdom of God. I know that you do. God knows that you do. So what does it take in order to meet that goal? That's what a rule of life is.
Right on.
Formation Defined. Josh, what do you have?
Bottom of 72, it says, the irony of our be true to yourself culture is that everyone ends up looking the same. So.
As it turns out, sin is incredibly cliche.
That's right.
That's true.
One of the bands I was in, Thorlaken, is one of my favorite bands that I've been in. We had a song called Different Like Them. So it's how we all try to be like unique and an individual by copying all these things that everybody else does. And now, I mean, we get it. Like you could say, well, if we all start using the same spiritual disciplines, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much. But
what kind of music was it, Josh?
We played, our early stuff was a little more punk.
Okay.
We evolved over time. I don't even know what I would call it. I mean, we still had a punk vein, but we matured quite a bit, which is frustrating. Maybe you've experienced this as a musician.
Okay.
And I think this is probably a common thing. Like I have video footage of our first show, and we had a blast. Our first show was a blast, but we wrote some really goofy songs. Like when Trevor, our guitarist, didn't show up to a practice one night, so we're like, well, hey, let's write a song that doesn't have a guitar part, and let's write it about the fact that Trevor didn't show up to practice.
Punk.
So we wrote a song. So we did. We wrote a song called "Where's Trevor." And it was fun, but it was totally silly. We're playing like our second to last show, and we've got people that go, play Where's Trevor? It's like, no, like we've written so many better songs than Where's Trevor.
Hey, maybe it hit. It hit for some reason.
We had a love song to Princess Peach. This was before like the new Mario movie.
What is like Princess
Peaches, like the Jack Black, the new one. Okay. We wrote this 20 years before
Pioneer.
That was even a thing. Yeah. So the chorus hook line was Princess Toadstool, you're so old school. How I love you, Princess Toadstool.
I didn't even know who you were talking about until you mentioned, okay, this is a part of Mario Brothers.
Go back to last episode where we talked about nostalgia games. And
yes, I do like some old Mario Brothers. It's fun. Anything else on 72, Jack? Well, we read the last sentence. How about 73 there?
Well, so he sets up what we're moving into.
The process.
So he says his working definition of spiritual formation in the way of Jesus is the process of being formed into people of love in Christ. And now, over these next several pages, we break that down. So again, the process of being formed into the people of love of... Holy cow. I'm going to start over on that one. The process of being formed into people of love in Christ.
I like Ruth Haley Barton talks about this. Mulholland was such a big part of the development of the Transforming Summer. Mulholland has a wonderful book called Secret Life, Inner Life. Fantastic book. Mulholland was a big part of all of the development of the coursework at Transforming Center, but he has a little bit of a longer definition. The process of being formed into the people of love in Christ for the sake of others. And I like that little addition. Ruth Haley Barton camps on that as well. For the sake of others. Your spiritual formation towards being like Jesus isn't for your benefit, though you will benefit and you'll experience the joy of God, but it's actually for other people.
Well, it's that, we've stole it as far as, I don't know if it's a Chris Conrad original, but that statement, for the glory of God, the benefit of others, and our joy. I mean, so there's a triple, benefit here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not that we do this for the sake of others and the glory of God to be miserable.
Right.
There is a joy that happens when we lean into the way of Jesus. So we've hit on this. Let's start that section titled The Process. And we've talked about this multiple times now. It says formation in the image of Jesus is a long, slow process, not a one-time event. I think so many things in life, and we've talked about this, just the microwave culture that we live in. This isn't necessarily a popular idea. We want quick fixes. We want silver bullets that just take care of
free
this
2-day
now.
shipping.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and they were talking about some maybe a challenge in a marriage relationship. And it's like, well, we got to get this figured out. Right. And it's like, man, some of this stuff that you're looking at, like it wasn't until year 15 that Nicole and I had even recognized that this was a hiccup, let alone start to address it. So you're not going to fix this next week.
Right.
Like this, there are things that they just take time.
Bottom sentence there on 73. The formation of the human soul doesn't work at digital speed. It just doesn't. You may want it to, but it doesn't.
Right. You can't upgrade your spiritual walk to be like, I want the 1 gig, download speed.
That's right.
Is there fiber? Do we have fiber? Spiritual formation fiber?
Well, in the previous paragraph there, he does talk about there are these kind of flashes in the pan and these lightning strike events in our spiritual lives, but then a lot of it is much, much slower. Definitely.
Well, and I think those key moments they're catalysts. They're not the end all be all. You can have these.
Can't camp there.
Right. You can have these really impactful. What's the word he uses? Key inflection points. Right. You can have those, but those spur us on to more long process type growth. It's this moment of like, oh, okay, now I'm gonna continue walking in this direction. It's not like hey, this really cool thing happened, and all of a sudden, I'm totally spiritually formed.
Yeah,
I'm set for life.
Yeah,
Doesn't work like that.
You wish it did, but if you think it's too good to be true, it is, and there are no magic bullets. It's true. It's just not a thing. How about page 74, Josh?
Why did I bracket this? Oh, this kind of builds off of our last episode where we were talking about anti-aging. Mm-hmm. So he says this: recently I was venting to my wife about how discouraged I was over my lifelong struggle with anxiety. I hate how stressed I get at times and how my mind will get stuck in an all too familiar loop of negative rumination. I can relate to that. Mm-hmm. And he says, do you think I'll ever mature beyond this? And she said, yeah, probably in your 60s. Well, but then it's, I mean, and you kind of chuckle, but and he even says she wasn't trying to be funny. She's
being
saying,
honest.
hey, this is probably about when this will happen.
Yeah.
Right. If we are intentional as we age, mm-hmm. I really do think that we will reap the benefits as we age. Yeah. And there might be things that right now it feels like there's no progress, mm-hmm. but there's work happening under the soil, to borrow like the farming cliche. Mm-hmm. Like all this stuff is happening under the soil, and maybe it's just like this little poke of green shooting through, but eventually you will have this mm-hmm. Plant that bears fruit. You will have all these different things. And then it gets into, that'll be sorry.
It's all right. Calls come in when you're a pastor. Yeah. That's what it is.
Well, it's a funeral home. So that's actually very fitting.
Yeah. Josh is probably being called to do a funeral.
And we are, and I actually know, so I had a text from one of our congregation members over the weekend.
Okay.
Scazzaro says he's quoting Scazzaro here. He says the best decade of your life will be your 70s. The second best will be your 80s, and the third will be your 60s.
By best, he did not mean the happiest, though I expect that too, but our richest and most joyful and helpful to others. Notice that. I think that's fantastic. In later part of life, you experience the joy of what it means to live for others in a greater way. I think that's really important.
Yeah. But I mean, he makes a good reminder too at the top of 75. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. There's joy to be had all along the way. It isn't that let's just hold out till we make it to 60, 70, 80, mm-hmm. and then maybe things will be okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is a joy in the journey.
Yeah, because we really don't know. I mean, that's another thing about life. It's like we don't know. Some of us may not make it to 60s, 70s, 80s, right?
That's a real thing.
We don't know what life brings, or doesn't bring. Yeah.
Yep.
What else? How about 75, the next large heading, of being formed?
That first paragraph, formation of the image of Jesus isn't something we do as much as it's something that is done to us by God himself as we yield to his work of transforming grace. Our job is to mostly make ourselves available.
Talk more about that, Josh, the availability.
Kind of flies in the face of the performance mindset. And I've probably ranted about this quite often on the podcast. We like things that we can show up, that we can do, that we can control. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure that we have some contribution to success. Mm-hmm. I don't think that some of that is just the way they're wired. Our culture definitely glorifies that, but it doesn't work out that way with our spiritual walk. So you go to this idea of the spiritual disciplines, and we've said it multiple times here. These aren't the disciplines. They're not the thing that changes us. They're not the end all be all, right? We don't do the disciplines for the sake of the disciplines. Mm-hmm. We do the disciplines to create that space, to make ourselves available to the transforming work of Holy Spirit within us. It makes us more aware of his loving presence. It creates space for us to, let him highlight those things in our heart that are out of alignment with the way of Jesus. And
the disciplines and practices are not grace. They are a means of grace. They are a means of grace. They're an access point to grace. So they're as important as you might think. I mean, we're in the lobby at Radiant Life Church. If I want to go outside, out into the parking lot where our cars are parked, I have to walk through 2 doors. If I were to try to get outside without going through those 2 doors, I could break the glass in one of these large windows and get outside, but I have to push open that door, and I've got to walk through the first door. Then I have to push open the next door, and I got to walk out that second door in order to access the outside of the church, the parking lot. That's all disciplines and practices. They're just doors. They're not the actual thing I'm looking for. I'm just trying to get outside into the parking lot of the church, right? I'm just trying to get with Jesus. I'm trying to be with Jesus. I'm trying to be like him. The disciplines and practices are the means that God has given us to accomplish that thing, to get where we want to go. They're not the goal. They're the pathway to the goal.
But he reminds us also. He says we do have a responsibility. This is jumping out a little bit. Responsibility to cooperate with this transforming grace. He won't force us on us. As St. Augustine said in the 4th century, without God we cannot, without us God will not.
The next paragraph there, much of Christians' current delusionment over their lack of transformation is because they have never learned their part in spiritual formation. But our job isn't to self-save, it's to surrender. And there's a lot of Greek philosophy that's in post-enlightenment things that are baked into the Christian faith. A lot of people see God as just this magical entity, and they have these magical things. They think God is just magic, like he's just going to... And you have nothing to do with this. He's autonomous. There's no relationship. He just does this thing. That's just not how God works. We have participation in this work of God in our lives. We have to choose it. About page 76.
76. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he references AA, which comes up multiple times in this particular section of the book. But he says, we who got ourselves into this mess can't get ourselves out. We're too broken to put ourselves back together, too lost to find ourselves. So, and again, this is where it's not just me coming up with enough, energy and willpower and oomph to get it done.
But in the AA world, that step 1, it still requires a choice. You must admit that you are powerless and helpless and that you need a power greater than you. So your part isn't to change yourself, it's to admit, which is still a step. It's still a choice. You still got to go to that meeting. You got to say, I cannot maintain sobriety outside of the helping hand of, now they say a higher power. We would obviously say the Holy Spirit in the follower of Jesus. But there's an admittance, and that's really all God's saying. Is like, can we admit that what I've said about you and life in my word is true? And now just let me work in you. Oh, okay, God. Yep, your word is true. Your spirit's real. Here I am. And then he does what he's going to do, but he's not just going to be like, you're going over here, you're doing this thing. That's not how he works. It's just not how he works. 76, that next large heading, Josh, into people of love, thinking about transformation. I love that middle sentence there. I see you've got it circled.
I've got it circled, but I like what he's got up top too, because this ties into a little bit, I think, what we talked about in one of the previous episodes, but seasons of life, temperament, personality, all that kind of a thing. He says, an apprentice of Jesus is one who has arranged their life around becoming like Jesus as expressed through their personality, gender, life stage, culture, ethnicity, and so on. Again, it's not about making a bunch of carbon copies of a disciple.
Right.
Like it's just saying a lot. I've tried, who says it? Man, because I want to give credit where credit is due. Because maybe it's Will Mancini. I don't remember it, because we'll sometimes say I'm trying to become more like Jesus, but and I might butcher this wording, but there's an author, I think it's Will Mancini, who says it's really about looking at what would Jesus do in this situation if he were me,
right?
Not because it factors in those things like personality. Again, I don't entirely cut off some of the defining characteristics of Josh to be a disciple of Jesus. Again, you see personality play out in the disciples, and you see personality play out in some of these things as they write. Matthew's gospel looks different than John's gospel, which looks different than Mark, which was influenced by Peter. You see
Right.
some of the personality things play out as they write to their unique audiences. All these different things. So yeah, it's not about becoming some clone or, like I said, carbon copy. I think that's important for us to remember. So go to your,
that next sentence, love is the acid test of spiritual formation. The single most important question is, are we becoming more loving? Not are we becoming more biblically educated or practicing more spiritual disciplines or more involved in church. Those are all good things, but not the most important thing. That is what... At the 100 Tables, we were having that conversation last night. It's like when we first came to Radiant Life, God spoke to us about some particular scriptures. First one was, wisdom is justified by her children, and and what Paul said to the Corinthians, I determined to know nothing among them except Christ and him crucified. So when Jesus is the center, you'll start seeing kingdom fruit. And that's what we saw early on, 9 years ago, when we first started coming here. It's like, oh man, don't understand all of it. I don't get all of it. Doesn't make sense, but I'm seeing people get saved. That's the impetus of love, right? Salvation, seeing people come from darkness into light. And it's what kept us here through times when we didn't always understand. We didn't always get it, but it was like, oh wow, we see the good fruit of God's kingdom, love, happening all around us in people's lives. I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to cling to that. I'm going to be a part of that. I'm going to serve that. That's what the intentions of the disciplines are. Yeah. What else, Josh?
And I think, go up onto the top of 77, because I think we are by nature self-deceiving. So he brings in the community aspect, because he's talking about the fruit of the Spirit, but not as we would measure them. But he says, would the people who know you best say you are becoming more loving, more joyful, more at peace, more patient, less frustrated, kinder, gentler, softening with time, and pervaded by goodness, faithful, especially in hard times, and self-control. Because again, I could look and say, oh yeah, I'm
more loving.
I'm definitely more loving. But would Nicole say that I'm more loving? Would my kids say I'm more loving? Would you guys, that I work with and spend a lot of time with, would you guys say that I am becoming more loving? That's the better measure.
Yeah.
Because if I'm being more loving, that will affect you, the rest of the team, Nicole, my kids. I can't, me being more loving, I don't know, try to, it's just a cycle.
Sure.
If I all by myself determine that I'm more loving, how in the world can I actually measure that?
Yeah. We're self-deceived.
Yeah.
I like the middle sections there in 77. Let's see. And all of this feeling more and more natural and less forced, meaning becoming like Jesus, more and more like, is this who you are? If not, no matter how well you know the Bible, how many books you read, we'll say podcasts you listen to or watch, how many insights you amass, or how many practices you build into your rule of life, you're not on track. Because the telos of the spiritual journey is to become like God, and God is love. Remember St. Ignatius's insight that God is loving. Love isn't just something God does, it's who he is. He can't help but love. It's his nature. Some of us are amazed that Jesus doesn't hate us for all our flaws and failures, but that just betrays our distorted vision of God. It would be much harder for God to hate us than to love us, because love is who God is inside his deepest self. God is love. And so as we become like him, that can be said in much smaller doses about, or should be said about us. Yeah.
No, that's good. But he hits on something important, and he builds on this as we continue on through this. But he talks about that distorted vision of God. I'm only a few chapters in. Years ago, I read this book. Have you ever read The Cure? It's got like three different authors. It's put out by an organization called True Face.
Okay.
So it's called Cure. I read it several years ago, didn't connect with it. I'm in a season of life now. I'm like, okay, no, maybe I wasn't ready for that book yet, but now I am. So it's called The Cure. I'm only 3 chapters in, but it kind of looks at this. The subtitle of the book is, "What if God isn't who you think he is and neither are you?" So,
oh, wow. That sounds like a slap in the face.
Yeah. So, but I think so many of us, and he deals with this, and I've probably brought it up in at least half of the episodes this season, but Live No Lies. So many things. I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday. I think so many things in our life boil down to identity and believing truth over lies. And that the lies that we believe could be about ourselves, it could be about God, it could be about other people. But when we function from a lie, we will not conduct ourselves in a way that resembles Jesus, because what we believe, if I believe a lie about God, like JMC just says, that's gonna mess with everything else.
Yeah.
If I believe a lie about me, that hey, yeah, I can believe that God is loving, I just don't believe that I'm lovable. That's gonna mess things up.
Yep.
If I believe that God is loving, I believe that I'm lovable, but I don't think you are, because you've done something that clearly renders you unlovable. Well, now I'm off the hook. I don't actually have to love you. It gets all kinds of sideways. So yeah, those lies that we believe, I think are really at the core of so much of this.
How do we combat those things, Josh? Can we park there a moment? Where have you seen victory in combating those lies? Or better said, let's go backwards and say, how have you discovered those things? When did they become obvious to you? So
I didn't really even think through this lens until I had, this was 4 years ago now, my freedom session. Okay. So I had 2 of them back to back. That's how messed up I was. That was rough. But I mean, that was one of the first times that I actually put words to some of the lies that I been believing for decades. And you're like, oh, wow. To hear somebody else speak and say, oh, so this is the lie the enemy is using, and you've bought into it. All right. As followers of Jesus, we can't be possessed by a demon, and Satan only has as much authority. God grants him authority to do some things sometimes, but I think oftentimes we give him ape loads of authority, because he'll whisper those lies, and if we grab a hold of that and we take that in, and that's what we base our life on, we're giving him way more authority than he actually deserves. So that was a huge turning point. I keep going back to that book, Live No Lies, because that was another huge one. Again, in that JMC,
spiritual.
He talks about this monastic handbook for battling demons, which sounds way more hardcore than it is. It's literally recognizing what are the lies that I'm believing here. Hey, I just treated this person poorly. All right, what lie fueled that poor behavior? Is it a lie about me? Is it a lie about them? Is it a lie about God? Let's start to recognize that. Okay, I see a pattern in my life. I tend to believe this. Well, turns out that's false. So what is the truth? And that's how you combat it, right? You combat a lie with the truth. Jesus says the devil's a liar. That's his native language.
But what are you doing with those truths? So you discovered some lies in a freedom session, things that you believed. Okay, so step 1 was awareness. So now you became aware of that. Now, what have you done to change those lies to be more recognizable as they come at you? So
some of it is actually including a small group of people in that. So I've made other, so Nicole, as I go through this, I say, hey, these are the lies that I struggle with. And then there will be times where we just had this actually just a few days ago. I said, hey, I'm really struggling with this lie, that it's coming back. Right? The devil's not original. Like he'll be like, man, hey, this thing worked for 36 years. Let's give that another go. And we often
resurfaces.
We'll often lapse right back into that same behavior as before, because it worked for decades.
Yeah.
So there will be times, and I'll loop her in, or somebody else, where it's like, hey, here's the lie I'm struggling with. I'm not like I recognize that it's there, and there's this tension because there's part of me that believes the lie still, and so then it's doing that work. And in this conversation the other day, Nicole says, all right, hey, well, let's go back to the truth. What is the truth? And so you do that. And sometimes this is why I think you need other people connect to this, because left to my own devices, if I'm having a bad day and this lie resurfaces,
you'll ruminate.
I'm far more likely, personality, all those things. I'm gonna swim in kind of this negative space right here, versus Nicole's gonna come in with a much more objective perspective and say, no, this is the truth. Now, with that, and she'll even say this. I love it. It's sometimes I need a good punch. She's like, hey, this is the truth. Now you have a choice. Are you going to believe the truth or are you going to believe the lie? And we all have that choice. So it's like, okay, what am I doing?
So what are some of the things that you do, we'll say disciplines and practices that have helped you live into truth rather than the base lies that you've struggled with?
So, and you guys are going to get probably sick of me talking about this, but I go back to like my gratitude or appreciation journal because I'm so naturally prone to focus on the negative. I'm naturally a pessimist, and I could just write it off as that. But I mean, we do have a say in that. I think we have a natural bent towards pessimism or optimism. Some of it can be circumstantial, but there's an element of choice in the way that we look at the world. Right. So for me, it's engaging in a discipline to find and focus on the blessings, not just the things that are going wrong. Because I do that all the time.
Okay.
I mean, I can very quickly pick up like, oh yeah, this went wrong, this went wrong, this went wrong, this went wrong. And that's like breathing to me, you can just do that without even thinking about it.
That's the entropy of sin and death.
That's the entropy of sin and death. So through the discipline of gratitude and or appreciation, and again, I've hit on this a little bit before. Chris Corsi, they talk about appreciation is kind of an upgrade, because this actually forces me to say, oh, I'm grateful for this cup of coffee, but I'm going to sit down and I appreciate. I had this just the other day. I appreciate like the berry note, and this I'm being
fully
much
present.
More focused and present to these good things that God has blessed me with, and this shakes that natural bent towards the negative, because I could say, oh well, this cup of coffee wasn't as good as yesterday's cup of coffee,
and it might not be,
but that's not what I'm gonna choose to focus on. Something that highlights the blessing. Again, it isn't just like happy clappy, like, oh, think positive.
Right, mindfulness.
No, it really is about recognizing the blessings of God in something as seemingly mundane as a cup of coffee. So
but you've been able to identify by doing these disciplines of appreciation and gratefulness that they've categorically put you in a space where you could see lies for what they were, as well as not believe them as fully as you once did.
Well, yeah, because again, just with that natural bent towards the negative, and the lies are usually, for me, the lies are usually negative things about myself, about somebody else, about God. So even while a discipline like an appreciation journal might not seem directly connected, I would suggest that it is, in the sense that it breaks an unhealthy pattern. To where now, let's say I this lie resurfaces, something negative about me, about somebody else, about God. I've trained myself to not just see that negative or immediately validate the negative, but to say, oh, well, what might be good about this? Or what's a different way to look at it?
Yeah. I just saw somebody pull up.
Oh, okay.
Listeners, viewers, I think it's important to just identify what just happened in that last 5 or we'll say 10 minutes. We just in real time watched and listened to Josh describe to us how he is practicing the way of Jesus, how he is processing things in his own life, the disciplines and practices that he has found to be very fruitful ways of managing things in his life. It was perfect, Josh. I was really thankful that you shared that with us. I think that there's something really beautiful about the vulnerability. That's a key step, friends. Like when there are those lies, is being able to speak those lies out And then there's sort of like a breathing out of that thing. That entropy it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't stop. But perhaps the entropy, everybody knows what entropy means. It is centrifugal too. Centrifugal, as the force of something happens in outer rings, the force is slower and less strong. But as that thing goes, have you ever dropped a coin at the mall and those things? When it gets down to the bottom and that centrifugal force, it's just whipping. And the power of that thing is the bottom's about ready to drop out. So what happens, I think, when we have the vulnerability, Josh, that you just described, even with Nicole, you slow that centrifugal force. You slow the sin and death entropy in your life to where that you can kind of get a focused look at it and say, oh, that thing's not really spinning out of control as quickly as I thought. In fact, that's bullcrap. Like, that's not even real. That's right. What that is. Thanks, Josh, for sharing that. That was wonderful. Let me ask you one more question, and you can say I'm not going to answer this question.
Now I'm really curious where you're going.
Are you conscious, like right now as you sit here with us, are you conscious of lies that you haven't spoken out loud to anyone yet?
Oh, probably.
You know of some things.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to like distill it down into something. Yeah, something. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of crap that swirls around up there, man.
So the point of that question, everyone listening and viewing, was to say there's always this process of kind of becoming aware of the lies of the enemy in our lives and facing them and dealing with them. And sometimes that means in the company of others. Sometimes it means just you and your cup of coffee and identifying the berry notes, right? But there is this process, sometimes in community, sometimes just in community with Jesus, that you deal with those things. This is where Josh and I would say, it's really important. Therapy is a really important modality. Counseling is a really important modality. Spiritual direction is a very important modality for just partnering with someone, companioning with someone through like what life is. What does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? Yeah.
Well, and again, here, I mean, which I'm all for. I see a counselor. I go once a month just to check in and talk to Lisa and talk to Chris. And, but then, here at Radiant Life, we have our freedom ministry, which kind of at the root of that, it's identifying what are the lies that the enemy is speaking to you or about you, or whatever, and how do you recognize that and combat it. So I'd encourage you to check that out as well. So All right, are we on 78?
Page. 78. Oh man, he uses Mulholland's quote later on in 78. Cool. We'll talk about that as well.
Nice. You were ahead of the times.
Robert Mulholland, his book, Invitation to a Journey. Invitation to a Journey. That's the book. It just came to me. Phenomenal book. Phenomenal. A must read. I love that top paragraph. Well, second paragraph on page 78. And remember, love as defined by Jesus is not just a nice feeling of affection. It's an attitude, yes, of compassion, warmth, and delight, but it's also an action. It's agape, to will the good of another ahead of your own, no matter the cost or sacrifice that may require. As Jesus said, greater love is no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. It's the cross, which isn't just something Jesus did for us. It's also something we do with him. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. We ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. Josh, I am an extreme person. I tend towards hyperbole. I've been really thinking about, I want to get a tattoo of the word others. Somewhere that I can see regularly and look at it and see it. Just like I have the tattoo of grace. Like I could see on my hand, others. Josh, JB, this is not about you.
Right across the forehead.
Well, I don't know about that extreme.
Backwards, so that when you look in the mirror.
No, that would probably land me in singleness.
Maybe check with Lisa on that one. Think of others first.
Yes, before you put a tattoo on your forehead. Yeah. And then Mulholland's quote there on 78, spiritual formation as a process of being formed. This is his definition, and I find this to be a fuller definition. Spiritual formation as a process of being formed into the image of Christ for the sake of others, and harps on for the sake of others' peace. Without this crucial element, formation will inevitably devolve into a private, therapeutic, self-help spirituality that is honestly just a Christianized version of radicalized individualism. Not a crucible to burn our souls clean and forge us into people of love like Jesus. It's a it's wellness, right? A lot of this has been co-opted into wellness and like a better life in Jesus. Actually, Jesus said, come and pick up your cross and die with me. And for the sake of others. I've yet to meet anybody or experience in any way that death was easy for anyone ever. Ever. Yeah.
All right, last section.
In Christ.
I'll probably wrap it up with this. I have so much. I like napped on this page. I don't have anything underlined on this.
Well, I think
you're just curious.
As we talk about
here,
disciplines and practices, this has to be so paramount. If you didn't hear anything we've said today, listen to this. Christ-likeness, and I'm going to say / spiritual formation, is the result of Christ in us. It's all grace. It's always been grace. We just choose to receive that grace. It's there in abundance. The abundant grace of God is there. We have to make the decision. I want some of that, right? I want some of that grace, but it is all God's work. Jesus has come to draw us into God's inner life of loving. I love that sentence. And then the bottom paragraphs there. This is the gospel. God has drawn near to us in Jesus, us, we who are sinful, broken, wounded, mortal, dying, and incapable of self-saving, with many of us completely uninterested in God or even enemies of God, to draw us into his inner life and to heal us by immersing us within the fold of his Trinitarian love, and then to send us out into the world as agents of his love. Jesus' invitation to apprentice under him isn't just a chance to become people of love who are like God. It's a chance to enter the inner life of God himself. It is the very meaning of our human existence. Our brothers and sisters in the Eastern Orthodox faith, which Ryan mentioned yesterday, Antioch is the Antiochian EOC. It is the first church. Our Eastern Orthodox brothers call this theosis, or becoming like God. Being holy as God is holy. There is this process of being changed into a greater reflection of the image of God. We are image bearers, but we can become a better reflection over time. Then that top sentence there on 80, this then is spiritual formation, the process of being formed into a person of self-giving love through deepening surrender to and union with the Trinity. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Practicing the Way, Be with Jesus, Become Like Him, Do as He Did by John Mark Comer. Again, listeners, viewers, check out practicingtheway.org. Start working on a rule of life. Let me give you 3 categories right now that you can create as headings within this rule of life. Your physical health, your emotional health, and your spiritual health. You could put these 3 in bold, font 25 or 32, and then underneath it, just start putting some disciplines and practices that correlate with those things, right? So under one of my physical headings, it's about exercising. I'm committed to doing this, and this. And I've got that written down, my commitments. You could start by just starting that heading. And then as God brings those things to you, write them down. You're going to delete stuff. You're going to change stuff. Seasons of life will change things. Josh has talked about, it's his season of life right now with little ones at home. It's a whole different world. It's a different ball game. To myself, when my youngest is 16, I'll be an empty nester soon. We just want to encourage you, get started. Do it now. You are going to die. You could die today.
We should just We should just have Haley stop the episode.
I'm serious, people.
Right after that.
It could be today. It could be tomorrow. You have no idea. So just come away from this podcast. Do something, man. Do something. Make a choice. Make a choice. Cut some things off. Put to death some things. Start doing some things that you know Jesus has been poking and prodding you to do for some time. Mm-hmm. You hear his voice. Be obedient to him. Start practicing the way of Jesus.
I can't say anything better than that, so that's good.
But you can tell us how to help people learn more about Radiant Reflections.
This has been episode 10 of season 4. We would love it if you would like, share, rate, review, subscribe. Mm-hmm. If you were blessed by this episode of the podcast, share it on your social media. Throw it up on Facebook. Mm-hmm. We're on pretty much every podcast platform.
We are. And don't forget, this podcast is comprised of the great Bible teaching from Radiant Life Church as well. Pastor Ryan shared a message from the Let's Go series yesterday. That's in the podcast stream right now. Yep. You're going to get to hear some of those things. You could skip around, listen to the teachings. Maybe you don't want to listen to Radiant Reflections. That's okay. But just subscribe.
There you go. Yeah, and Dustin, make sure you let me know where you want your coffee. So.
That's right. That's right. And we will see you next week, season 4 of Radiant Reflections, episode 11. God bless you guys.